looking at the national deficit, and which is also somewhat related. Since we're talking about jobs, well, the next thing is the economy. Right now, the deficit is at 16 trillion.
Yes, it is.
And it's not going to get smaller by anyone's objective view in the near term.
Yeah.
But there is something that's very important that's coming up, and that there's a debt ceiling limit that's coming up, and there's a budget that needs to be made. Obviously, since these are big concerns for a lot of constituents,
Yeah.
where do you stand on that?
Well, it's a big concern for me. We've set up what people are referring to as a fiscal cliff for the end of this year, and that includes a number of things, some of which you just mentioned. You know, the debt ceiling crisis of last year created a scenario where we tried to have a budget super committee come up with a series of spending cuts and revenue enhancements that would help put us in a position of balancing the budget over 10 years. They could not agree on anything that would go to the House floor. So the super committee failed, and now we have these mandatory cuts that go into place January 2nd, which will cut defense and certain domestic programs as well, to the tune of about $110 billion per year over 10 years. You know, with this sort of very blunt instrument of trying to, reform our fiscal books, that's unacceptable. So Congress is going to have to come together and create a mixture of, spending cuts and tax increases that put us on a balanced budget trajectory. This may seem insurmountable right now because of what we're staring at, but a short time ago, in fact, when I was working for the House of Representatives in the 1990s, we actually balanced the budget. We created a surplus. So the idea of fixing this problem is not that remote. We've done it before. In the year 2000, we had a $236 billion budget surplus, and we were paying down the national debt. So there's a model out there for us to use. And going back to some of the Clinton era tax rates could put us in a position to balance the budget very, relatively soon, 10, 15 years, and pay down the national deficit. This is very important that we do this, critically important. And I'm no fan of budget deficits or building up the national debt. It's a very unhealthy thing and threatens our long-term fiscal stability. But we cannot allow this current economic recession that started in 2008 dictate the terms of our long-term fiscal policy. These are structural things that take years to resolve. I mean, we're coming off the past 8-10 years where we did things very differently. The budget, of course, was in surplus in 2000, but then we had 2 rounds of tax cuts, 2 unfunded wars, a new Medicare Part D program, a recession. And cumulatively, those make up about 80% of our annual deficits today. So if you were to take away those factors that had nothing to do with things that have occurred on this current president's watch, our budget would be in balance within 10 years. That's what the fiscal analysts expected. But of course we can't. We can't, make things that have already happened just go away. We have to deal with the reality that we have. And so we're going to have to avoid the sequester that was born out of the budget debt ceiling crisis of last year.
Right.
We're going to have to deal with raising the debt ceiling again by the end of this year. And that needs to be done without any strings attached. That's not how you solve budget challenges, by holding the full faith and credit of the U.S. government hostage to spending demands. That's the wrong way to go about things. This current Congress tried that last year. It was disastrous. That's why we have the sequester. So we already know what not to do when it comes to the debt ceiling, but we've got to resolve that issue. We've got to resolve the alternative minimum tax, which is something that can really put a huge fiscal burden on about 30 million American taxpayers. That's got to be resolved. The expiration of the unemployment benefits that occur at the end of this year, the expiration of the payroll tax holiday that we have, and the expiration of the Bush-era tax cuts. All these things are coming together, and what I think a lot of people worry about is sending the same people down to Congress to fix these things, who have really created this mess. I mean, these issues are like a train coming. We knew that it was going to arrive. We saw this thing coming down the tracks, and we haven't done anything to prepare or to start chipping away at these challenges in advance. Like so many things that this current Congress has done, they've waited past the last minute to do something. And we're going to be heading into a very chaotic next 2 months. And my plea to the voters is to look at the folks who got us into this mess and think about whether you would want to send them back again to fix it. Because if we wake up on November 7th and have the same leadership and much of the same membership of the U.S. House of Representatives come 2013, the folks who are in there now, John Boehner remains Speaker. He's going to say, well, the American people have voted. We've had our referendum on our leadership. I'm still the Speaker. I'll be the Speaker in the 213th Congress. And 113th Congress.
Well, I was just gonna let that go.
130. I'll be the Speaker in the new Congress,
right.
And therefore I've got my mandate, and I think that's heading us towards 2 more years of complete obstruction. And I think President Obama is going to be reelected at this point. He's shown very strong leadership this week in light of Hurricane Sandy. He's picked up important endorsements from the mayor of New York City and Colin Powell, very well-respected independent people. And I think he's going to be our president once again. The question that people have to have on their minds when they go to vote is, do we want to send a Congress back that's going to have a steady policy of obstruction? Or do we want to maintain the current gridlock that we've had for the last 2 years? And I hope people will say no. I hope people will say, the job numbers that, have been up. The recent job report that came out today showed 180,000 jobs in September. The prior months' job creation numbers were revised upwards. Consumer confidence is upwards. This president has created 4.5 million jobs since, the depth of the recession when the recovery started in 2009. His track record is actually pretty good. People are seeing that, and this isn't time to change course and go back to the way we were doing things before in the Bush administration, which is basically the Romney agenda. So I think people are seeing that that Barack Obama is going to be our next president. Let's give him a Congress that will actually work with him to get things done.
Okay. Let me make one correction in what you stated about today's numbers.
Yeah.
It's actually 171.
171.
Not 180,000. It's 171,000.
I stand corrected.
Just want to be sure that we give them the right numbers. But everything else is absolutely on the mark. Let me ask you this. Then again, we're going to jump into somewhat of a different direction. Going into some of the issues we were talking about, which are coming up from the sequestration, and also an issue that's been very big on the campaign trail, but also affects people here, which is Medicare, Social Security. And these are major parts of the debt. They are major parts of what's going to be discussed in the next 113th Congress. And I know that you mentioned it on your site. It was one of the first things that you did mention on your site in the issues. And considering that it is, if no change is made, they both go backward. Is that something that, from your experience, that you're looking to work on? Is there something what do you promote about that?
Okay, well, nothing in the immediate future is going to end Medicare or Social Security. They will reach a point where they're paying out more than they take in, but the benefits will still be there. They'll just will not be as strong as they should be. So we need to make clear that these programs are not going to go bankrupt and end anytime soon. That being said, there are structural things that need to be looked at to extend the life of the Medicare Trust Fund and the Social Security Trust Fund, and we can do that. What I reject doing is using the current fiscal crisis, the economic recession of 2008, as a reason to do something very drastic in terms of balancing the budget in the next 10, 15, 20, 30 years, as the Paul Ryan budget proposed to do. And one of the reasons I am running is this budget document that has passed the House of Representatives twice now, known as the Paul Ryan budget. And it's something that my opponent voted for twice. And now, not all Republicans did. In fact, some New York Republicans voted against the Paul Ryan budget, but Mr. Hanna voted for this document, and it raises serious questions about his priorities and his views on the role of government and how we balance the budget and how we distribute tax cuts. And I reject his priorities, and that's one of the reasons I'm running. The most obvious problem with this Paul Ryan budget is its reconfiguration of Medicare, and basically setting it on a course to fully privatize Medicare at some point. The Wall Street Journal itself said that the Paul Ryan budget would end Medicare. And what Richard Hanna has voted for is to give seniors vouchers instead of the guaranteed benefits of the Medicare program. And using this method, the idea being that seniors would have less money to spend on health care, therefore somehow health care costs would come down. They would meet the fact that seniors don't have enough money for health care, therefore that's going to control costs. There is no example in history to show that that method of cost control actually works. So it's taken a huge gamble giving seniors vouchers that are paid to an inflation index that is non-medical. So the vouchers do not keep pace with the cost of medical inflation. And by all projections, including the Kaiser Family Foundation, these vouchers will leave seniors paying over $6,000 more a year for health insurance. And the irony of this, the cruel irony, is that this does not control the cost of Medicare, that Medicare has cost controls built into it, by the hospital reimbursement rates, the doctor reimbursement rates. There are a whole host of things in the healthcare reform law that bring down the cost of Medicare. These things would be suspended in Paul Ryan's world and in the things that Mr. Hanna has voted for. So the cost of healthcare would actually go up. The amount of money that seniors would have to pay for it would go down, and we'd have a situation where, when we created Medicare, half the seniors did not have health insurance. We'd be moving back to that era where seniors would just be doing without the health insurance that they currently have. And to me, that's unacceptable. There are ways that we can shore up the cost of Medicare. If we're serious about this, let's pick the low-hanging fruit. Let's allow the federal government to negotiate drug prices through Medicare. We don't do that. We should. We do it in the VA. We do it in Medicaid to a certain extent. And we could reduce the cost of Medicare prescription drugs if we allowed Medicare to do that. But it's interesting that the Medicare reform that passed during the Bush administration, having to do with prescription drugs, expressly prohibited the federal government from doing this. Not because it wasn't good policy, because of the impact of the pharmaceutical lobbying force. They did not want this because expensive drugs is good for their business. It's bad for American taxpayers and it's bad for Medicare. So if we're going to have a serious conversation about Medicare, that's got to be item number one that we look at to bring in the cost of Medicare.
Okay. There's a lot.
And you gotta talk straight when you're talking about Medicare.
No.
If you're gonna go down and vote to privatize it or vote for vouchers, you can't come back up to the district like Mr. Hanna has and say that you don't support vouchers. He put it on his website that he supports the Paul Ryan plan and believes that it will strengthen and preserve Medicare. And now that he's in the height of an election season and he's learning from seniors that they don't like that, he's saying that he doesn't support vouchers. And I'm saying, that's no way to run your office or run your record. You got to, explain yourself, stand up, for the votes that you take, and not try and slip out of them and say, oh, well, I voted for vouchers, but I don't really like them,
Well,
It doesn't work that way.
I understand. As devil's advocate, I have to say, since I haven't had a chance to ask him directly about that question,
Yeah.
because he hasn't responded to me, I can't confirm or deny that. I haven't seen that on his site myself, but
You can Google it and find out what he's saying, and it'll make your head spin.
and I would advise people to just double check that, because obviously that's a significant issue, which we would love to hear him say something about, but he seems to not want to talk about it.
No, I wouldn't either if I was him.